Mr. President, I would like to address the subject of Syria.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. First of all, I want to commend anyone that is listening to my voice to view the videos that the intelligence community has released. They came from social media. They are 13 videos in excess that came from a body of in excess of 100 videos, but they show the horror of what happens to the human body with an attack by a weapon of mass destruction, in this case, chemical weapons, in this case, a gas called sarin. Mr. President, it is my hope that the President, when he speaks to the nation on Tuesday, that he will show clips of those videos, because I think that very few Americans have seen the extent of those videos, even though they've been shown on some cable shows in some limited amounts. But if they could see the range of why almost a century ago, in 1925, the nations of the world came together in a treaty. This was after the use of chemical weapons in World War I. And this treaty banned the use of chemical weapons anywhere, anytime, including in war, because of the horrific nature that their use causes. That was subsequently, in the 1990s, reaffirmed, Mr. President, in a convention or some kind of conclave where the nations of the world, something I believe in excess of 180 nations, signed banning the use of chemical weapons. And if you will watch the videos, you will see why. You will see what happens to an innocent human being as they struggle for life before the throes of death overtake them. You will see on these videos. And of course, parents may want to use discretion because it's going to make a lasting impression. You will see how the body starts to shut down by the nerves being attacked. Now, interestingly, for the first time in a CBS interview today, President Assad of Syria has admitted today that Syria has chemical weapons. Up to this point, that was denied. And no wonder he would want to deny, because when you see what happens in the use of them and what it does to the human nervous system, and I don't want to be graphic because I want anybody listening to what I'm saying to watch them, and I hope the President will show them Tuesday night to see how the human body convulses and how when it attacks the nervous system, the convulsions and the twitching and what happens to the face and what happens to the respiratory system and all the evidences that come from that. The American people need to know what we are dealing with, not just in Syria, but in other nations that possess chemical weapons. not only sarin, which was the gas used here, but also mustard gas and also a toxin called VX that directly attacks the nervous system and does not have to be inhaled like mustard gas or sarin to do its evil deed, but instead can be absorbed, VX, through the skin. And so, if the American people will understand the consequences of the use of this, then we'll understand why it is classified as a weapon of mass destruction, along with biological weapons of mass destruction, introducing some plague among a community of innocents. And of course, the weapon of mass destruction that most everybody recognizes, the nuclear weapons. They're all three weapons of mass destruction: chemical, biological, and nuclear. And that's why in the family of civilized nations, we have said that their use is so abhorrent that civilized humans say that they should be banned. But they weren't. They were used extensively on August the 21st. Now, before I give the unclassified evidence, I want to point out that maybe there is a little opening on the occasion of the Russian foreign minister today having said, since our Secretary of State, almost in an offhanded comment a few days ago, said, well, it would certainly be a game changer if he would allow Assad, would allow the international community to come in and take control of his Syrian chemical weapons. The Russian foreign minister today picked that up. And supposedly there's a comment by an official out of Syria that says that that is worth looking into. I can't speak to the authenticity of that comment. I've heard that it was said, but whatever it is, of course, Assad is the decision maker, and it's ultimately going to come down to him. But in the meantime, what the United States ought to do, and the Congress of the United States ought to authorize what the President of the United States has requested, that the Congress back him in giving him the authority to use a limited, short duration retaliation in degrading his capability, Assad's capability of utilizing these weapons in the future. If the U.S. Congress will give the President that authority, it may well be the additional incentive for the ultimate decision maker, President Assad, to do what the Russian foreign minister has suggested. And that would be a good thing. But in the meantime, we're going to be debating this, and we are going to be put to the question, do we support the president in this time of peril? Well, let's look at the facts. I think when you see the videos, clearly most every reasonable human being is going to conclude that chemical weapons were used on innocents in the Damascus suburbs on the night of the 21st. So the question then, of course, is, well, is there a chain of custody to show that, in fact, that they came from the Syrian army? And there is unclassified a body of evidence that clearly shows, so that, to put it in the speak of the intelligence community, we have high confidence. That means that it happened. So how did that happen? The assessment is that the Syrian chemical weapons personnel who are associated with the chemical weapons part of the Syrian command were preparing chemical munitions prior to the attack. There were streams of data. This is all unclassified. There were streams of data of human signals and geospatial intelligence that revealed regime activities were associated with the preparations for that chemical weapons attack. Syrian chemical weapons personnel, we know, were operating in the Damascus suburb from August the 18th all the way through August 21st, and that was the suburb that was attacked. And multiple streams of intelligence indicate that the Syrian army executed the rocket and artillery attack against those suburbs in the early morning hours of August the 21st. We have satellite detections that corroborate those attacks from a regime-controlled neighborhood to where the attacks landed. And at the same time then, social media reports started exploding about a chemical attack in the Damascus suburbs, and those social media reports started coming at 2:30 in the morning. 3 hospitals in Damascus received approximately 3,600 patients displaying the symptoms of a nerve agent exposure, and they received them in less than 3 hours on the morning of August the 21st. And as I said earlier, there have been over 100 videos attributed to the attack. Many of them, and this has been distilled down into 13 videos, which show large numbers of bodies exhibiting the physical signs of nerve agent exposure. Any member of the Senate will have access to the classified information that shows that the Syrian opposition does not have the capability to fabricate those videos or the physical symptoms verified by the medical personnel. And so when you put all of this with past Syrian practice, some of the small-scale attacks that they had done previously, then the conclusion is obvious that the regime, the Syrian regime of Bashar al-Assad, that regime was witting and directed the attack on August the 21st. So, to this senator, who has had the privilege of classified information, to this senator who has visited with President Assad 3 times, the last time of which was 6 years ago, of which the two of us had a sharp exchange. Then over what was happening in Lebanon, the fact that he was harboring Hamas and Hezbollah, of which, of course, he denied. To this senator, the conclusion is obvious. There's a substantial body of information that corroborates that it was the Syrian government's responsibility in a chemical weapons attack on August the 21st. There is additional information for the senators to see. Now the question is, are we going to agree to the president's request that we authorize him to attack? Well, if we don't, where does that leave the president on any kind of negotiations in the future? If the president then decided to go ahead and attack, you automatically give to the opponents in these countries, especially President Assad and North Korea and Iran, you give to them the obvious scenario that the American people are so divided they won't support the president. And thus, if he were to decide to attack, that all the more, even though he knows it's his responsibility to provide for the national security, and he has sworn to provide for that national security, and yet we look so divided at that point, whatever the scenario is to the future. But look what it does in the minds of other people who want to do harm to the United States. Does it give additional license to North Korea if we were to do nothing? And North Korea is sitting on a huge stockpile of chemical weapons, not even to speak of their nuclear weapons. And what about Iran? That we are so very concerned as they continue to energize weapons material, as they march down the road, perhaps, to building a nuclear weapon. What kind of message does it send to Iran? And just game that out. If Iran had a nuclear weapon or felt free to use chemical weapons, what that would do to the interest of the United States in that region of the world, not even to speak of our allies in the region, of which there are many. So I think it is clear to this senator. I will admit that I don't know why the president did not keep his own counsel and make the decision without saying that he wanted to come to Congress. But he made that decision, and now it's up to us. Hopefully, there may be some validity to this report coming from the Russian foreign minister. But we won't know that for a long while until, as we say, the proof's in the pudding, with Assad turning over control of all the chemical weapons to an international body. In the meantime, are we going to support the President of the United States? And I clearly think, in the interest of the national security of this country and our allies, that is a position that we must take. I will vote yes on the resolution. Thank you, Mr. President, and I yield the floor.